Let me just first express admiration for your incredible personal story. And all of us are one or two generations from a story like that, and yours is more immediate, so let me just first express that. Speaking about policy issues, though, AB 5, controversial, in many quarters in California, unpopular. You supported and helped implement. In 2019, you described that those who do not want to comply with the overreaching law as not understanding the economy that, quote, we want in California. And the we want is kind of a royal we. And it's important to note that the legislature had to go back and pass almost 100 exemptions. So I say that because I think one thing that concerns us, would you commit to not trying to force an AB 5 type regulation upon the rest of the country, that which was done in California?
Thank you for the question, Senator. The short answer to your question is yes. The context to your question is that the ABC test in California was first adopted by a unanimous California Supreme Court decision that was written by a Republican-appointed Chief Justice.
Now, isn't it fair to say that this AB 5 greatly expanded that decision and covered workers that were not necessarily covered by that decision but went far beyond?
Well, following that decision, the California legislature did pass AB 5 that codified the test. To be extremely clear, I was not part of the legislature. I have never been a legislator. I have tremendous respect for what you all do. I have not done that job. And so the ABC test was codified in California. It's not the only state that has it. But when the Department of Labor issued our rule on independent contractor versus employee classification, we explicitly did not include the ABC test in our rule. So that is why I answer yes to your question. Only Congress can adopt the ABC test. I cannot, I will not.
There are other things that could be done through a rule that gets at the same point, even if it does not include the ABC. So is that an equal kind of commitment to not attempt to do through rule that which may be absent ABC but otherwise has the same sort of effect?
I will commit with absolute certainty and commitment that I will always have full faith and fidelity to federal law.
Now that's different because I can promise you I've learned to give me a smart attorney and they can find all sorts of interpretations of federal law. Up is up and down is down, but no, sometimes up is down. Let me move on though, just because I've got limited time. When we met, you said you would not pursue changes to the joint employer regulations if confirmed. We know this is a priority for labor unions. Could you again and for the record give assurances that you will not pursue changes to the joint employer rule as Secretary of Labor?
So, Senator, I know you mentioned the concern about franchisees and franchisors, and I enjoyed our conversation. I mentioned that my family, my parents had a franchisee business. The reason my sister and I were able to go to college—
I got limited time.
Okay, so I understand the importance of the model. There's not a joint employer rule on our regulatory agenda. It was not on our agenda that came out last year.
And is that to say it would not become on the agenda at a later point?
It will not be on our agenda that comes out in June. Correct, Senator.
Next, Ms. Sue, thank you. There's about 150 labor contracts coming up representing 1.6 million workers expiring this year. And one of the concerns about your nomination is that you lack direct experience negotiating and handling labor disputes. And so can you point to any experience negotiating successful outcomes from labor disputes?
Thank you very much, Senator, for that. So I did work very closely with then Secretary Marty Walsh on the negotiations that concluded on our part in September that involved the rail unions and the rail employers.
It's fair to say that it actually took Congress and the President to step in and to conclude those negotiations. Those were not successful. Fair?
When we concluded our 20-hour negotiation, a tentative agreement was reached that averted what everyone was then saying would have been a national disaster. It is true that there were other parts of the process, as there always are in collective bargaining negotiations at the table. The other thing, to your question, Senator, is that one of the other big issues that's looming is what's happening at the West Coast ports, the ports of LA and Long Beach, in my hometown, involving parties and people that I have known for some time, and I have been actively engaged in that conversation as well.
Now, it's fair to say, though, that those seem to be breaking down. There was a press release in February with optimism, but subsequently there's been other reports not quite so optimistic. So it'd be a stretch to say it's a successful process, correct?
They're not concluded yet, Senator. That is true. My role, if confirmed, would be to, when asked, help make sure that the parties stay at the table, that they are able to grapple with some of the hard issues that they face, and that if asked to come assist, I would do so. I would not give up on those negotiations at this time, Senator.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter articles in a letter concerning the ongoing disruptions of the West Coast ports to President Biden from over 300 retailers, urging him to step in and negotiate between the union and management to prevent disruption to the supply chain of American consumers.
Without objection.
With that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you.